just what were your raw takeaways from those earnings, and was it kind of an inflection point for you on Palantir?
I don't have complete thoughts. There are some one-offs in the income statement that we like, the statement of operations, that we don't have clarity on, because Palantir, almost 2 weeks in here, still no 10K out. Come on, Palantir, are you SMCI or something? Come on, give us the 10K. But yeah, no, my initial thoughts were, I was kind of shocked. Like, a lot of us knew that Palantir sooner or later would have that inflection point where it just clicks. It starts to make sense to the broader audience. And we saw that with all the analyst upgrades. Like, I haven't read many of their research reports, their updates after the earnings, but I've seen their revisions of their estimates. And in some cases, like going out, the ones that really try to forecast like far out, like they have more than doubled their estimates for Palantir. So it's kind of crazy. For me personally, there were two things that I was kind of worried about with Palantir's business, and we can get into those later. But one of them was the customer count growth. Like, to us that have been following them, we know that like the bootcamps have been scaling up massively. So we kind of expected this exponential growth in customer count. Of course, not every bootcamp is attended by potential customers. That sales cycles might be extended. It's not like you attend and then you sign a contract. That's not how it works. It varies by business to business. But they ran something like 400 bootcamps in Q4 of 2023. No, 300. And then it was up to 600 in Q1 of 2024. Then over 1.2K by Q2. So they were like doubling and doubling and doubling how many bootcamps they ran. So of course, when you're following the business, you're like, well, when's this customer count going to come around? And even like it was starting to slow down, like on a quarter over quarter basis. I was like, oh, it's kind of worrisome, because the whole Palantir thesis, I think for a lot of people, hinges on how many customers they can get, because they scale up the customers. For those that track net dollar retention, for example, it was 20 for this quarter. That means that essentially 20 out of the 36% growth came from existing customers. That just shows you how important it is that Palantir gets these customers, because they acquire them and then over time scale them up as they implement more and more solutions from Palantir. So seeing that make a huge jump in Q4 was massive for me personally, because I'm like, okay, it's coming around now. Like, this is important, and it sets a growth for the next couple of quarters. Like when you see that customer count is increasing, because that net dollar retention is also increasing. And the other thing that I really looked forward to, which I'm not really convinced on yet, and especially given Karp's commentary on the whole thing. Essentially, ever since Palantir went public, from the first earnings call to even this one, like 80% of the earnings calls, they are very pessimistic about Europe. And, there's a lot of growth left in the US specifically. Like, they're just getting started. Like, they have like 600-700 customers. Like, Europe is not even a factor yet. But over time, like, if you want to reach those growth rates that a lot of people are envisioning for Palantir, they will have to start getting the international market with them as well. And we know already that they're not going to sell to China, they're not going to sell to Russia or any opposition of the West. So it's kind of limited in geography. Of course, for now, it's all fine. US is growing massively. It's not a concern, but international has been static for like 2-3 years now. So that's kind of concern. That hasn't been resolved yet, but the customer count one was huge. Also, what I looked for specifically was we got an UBS report just prior to Q4 earnings. And that UBS report talked to Palantir clients, Palantir partners, and I don't believe they have a citation from anyone within Palantir. But what they were trying to figure out was, how is AIP being monetized? And that was not clear to many of us, because famously Karps came out and said when AIP launched, like, we have no pricing strategy. We're just going to take the whole market and we'll figure out the rest later. But this UBS report came out about a year and a half from the AIP launch. And it outlined the business model. Basically, they are charging for AIP, and we're seeing that in the numbers, like the net dollar retention rate, the sales efficiency, stuff like that. But what this report said essentially was AIP is usage based. So some businesses, they might only implement one use case with AIP. That's not going to bring up their bill, like their invoice from Palantir, by much. Like it might be a couple percentage points. However, for those businesses who want to implement AIP across their whole business or even power their business by AIP, like we can see 2 to 3x the invoice from those customers. And seeing like, okay, you are charging them this much for Foundry, and just by implementing AIP, you can see 2 to 3x that invoice, which is massive. And that's also why this whole like acquire, expand, scale philosophy that Palantir used to report on, like they used to have these cohort growth slides in their presentations that they have since removed. But that really brings it back to like the core of Palantir's scaling mechanism, where you acquire a customer, you prove your value. Like the first two phases are like at a cost for Palantir, or they used to be. I don't know how it's now because they don't report on it. But acquire and expand phases usually were like, well, we'll do a demo with you, we'll lose money on it, but during the scale phase, like the final stage, that's when we really start to charge you and make a lot of money. So basically the whole thesis has been acquire a bunch of customers, prove them like how much value you can provide, have them implement your products across their whole enterprise, power the whole enterprise. It doesn't matter which industry, like Palantir is really industry agnostic. You can do everything from finance to logistics to hardware to like you name it. Like you can implement Palantir everywhere. And when you prove the value, and then you just start to scale up within the same business. So that's why customer account was really, really important to track for this quarter, and seeing that net dollar retention rate increase, because it shows us that AIP is actually being charged for. And if you look at the net dollar retention rate over the past quarters, you can really see that after Q2 of last year, oh no, well, it's 2 years now, I forgot it's 2025, but AIP launched somewhere Q1, Q2 of 2023. And after Q2 of 2023, you can just see that net dollar retention rates start to increase. So I think that's mainly due to AIP, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. That's why we're reaching these like amazing growth rates, because they don't need to grow that much from new clients when the net dollar retention rate is already like 20%. So it's massive. I thought kind of long answer, but that was really my main takeaway from the earnings, like seeing, okay, are we getting the payoff from AIP? This whole AIP build-up, is it starting to pay off? And I think it is.
So no, I thought that was a really good answer, and that gets into the heart of what the scaling challenge has been for Palantir, which is that they need more customers and they need to monetize and upsell the existing customers they have.